Oh. And we're back. And it is COMP392, that's Advanced Graphics, and it's week 10, part 3 of our broadcast. I'm going to be talking about the final project, so this is all the details around the final project. So use this video as a reference, please. I'd ask you guys to do that if you have questions around what we're going to be talking about. So I'm going to try and answer as many questions as I can today around this. So let's go into it. Now, the details are up on eCentennial, and it's broken down into 4 little parts. They're not equally weighted. This is where it's a little bit different than your assignment number 3. So part 1, due next week on wow, is it April 1st? Wow. It's not an April Fool's joke. I swear, it's due next week, okay? On the Friday at midnight. What we're going to have is your first draft of your external game document and your menu scene. That's what I want. Also, of course, it's going to include things like, give me your GitHub repository, your structure, that kind of stuff. That's due next week. So your GitHub structure, you know, those things. And of course, you want to put it up on Azure, making sure that all works. That's all due next week. It's almost like your setup, if you will, just like you did last time with your assignment number 3, part 1. It's very similar to that. Now remember, that's the first part. It's worth 5% of your final grade, right? So it's kind of like, hey, show me your game concept. Show me what your game is about. That's what you're going to be basically doing in your external document. And that might entail you combining with 1 or 2 other people in this one and saying, hey, I want to take my partner's level 1. We're going to use the level 1 as the first level, and we're going to build on this level 1 together. So level 2 and level 3, you're going to build together over the course of the next 3 weeks to kind of put something together that's a complete game. So this is kind of your final project. This whole thing in different parts is worth about 30%, okay? But it's broken up over, so it's actually 4 little assignments worth like 5 and 10% each, right? Each assignment does not depend on the other one because each assignment, you've got to have the next step, kind of ready to go. So if you don't get your first one done, oh well, you move on to the second one in phase 2, right? So part 2 is due the week after on April 8th, and that's the Friday again. I want you to have your first working level done by then, because by now you should have an idea. Think about this. You probably can use somebody's level, right? One of you guys' level as a starting point, right? If you want to. Or make something new if you want to as well. You don't have to use another person's level. You can make something new with you and your partner or partners. Your basic game mechanics should be in place. So things like collisions, movement, enemies, all that stuff, because your level 1 is done, right? And your scoring system, that's worth 5%. Again, I'm basing the 5% off of, you've already done this thing before. All you're doing is basically creating, you can use a template that you've already used, almost the exact same, one of your templates to create level 1. That's due the 12th week. Week 13 is where your second and third levels are due. So this is worth 10% of your final grades. This is where it becomes a little bit more challenging. So you're creating new material now. I'm not going to allow you guys to make second or third levels from your partners. So you can't say, well, hey, partner number 1, we'll use first level from him, and then second level from him, and third level from him, and we can kind of combine it to make a complete game. No, that's not how it works. You make your first level, it might have a theme. Like obviously your game has to have a theme for something, right? And your second and third level have to be the same theme, but different goals, right? So maybe a different way of, it's drawn differently or whatever. It's constructed in a different way. It has a different ending. It looks a little different. You might have different enemies, different hazards, those kind of things. It won't take you that long to kind of put something together like that. It's just a matter of putting your second and third levels together. You got about a week to do that. So this is where week 3, that's week 13, you're gonna have to bear down and kind of put something together. Yeah. I didn't say it does, right? And the reason why I'm suggesting it might be easier for you to make it with physics and everything else because of all the other factors, although it could also be more difficult depending on what kind of game you want to make. It has to be a 3D game, okay? So that's where the thing goes in. I can't tell you what kind of game you're going to make, right? Like for example, if you wanted to make it so that you can simulate physics with no physics, I'm good with that. Like if you want to make, I don't know, some kind of platforming 3D game, but there isn't any real physics involved. You just want to, translate from one place to the other, and you can calculate a faux physics. That's up to you. I think it's a lot more work, in my opinion, but it's how you construct it the way you want. Okay, so that's worth again 10%, and it's due Friday, April 15th at midnight. Now, if you're smart, since you're constructing level 1, right, by week 2. Think about with weeks, the second and third weeks working levels early. In fact, I would kind of kind of think about it right here in your concept. In your concept, think about what you're building. Don't think about last minute. Don't try and slap things together at the last second, because it's just going to bite you, right? You're not going to have time, right? So that's going to be something. And I've gotten submissions for this kind of project before where they're like, hey, I got one level. Is that okay? Well, if you've got one level, that means you've got 5% for this and 5% for this out of 30. That's like 10% out of 30. So for this assignment, you would have failed if you did one level, right? So please don't just give me one level. That's not a pass, right? What about if you did part 1 and part 2 and part 4, right? Like, 'cause that's possible too, right? I mean, that would have passed you. It would have been, kind of a 66% or whatever equivalent. Yeah, you could, because here I'm saying, do your instruction screen and your game end scenes, right? Those are the last things. These are like final touches. All your final touches should happen for your game for part 4, but it's worth 10%. And I'm doing this so that way, let's say for some reason, you can't do part 3, right? You still, with this one, which is a little easier actually, it should have been only worth 5%. With this one, and this one, you can still pass. Yeah.
For the second and third level, could we do different difficulties, or
no. No, I would love to do different difficulties, but the problem with that is people just speed the game up, right? So I don't want that. I've had experience with that before, or they had too many enemies, and it becomes undoable. It becomes unplayable most times. Most people don't have a good sense of game balance and game mechanics where they can sit there and go, realism versus playability, difficulty versus playability. They don't have a sense of that. So for the most part, I'd have to really be convinced. Like, you'd have to really convince me with your partner that can work. But for now, I would say no. Please try not to do that. And in fact, you would be still making 3 levels, but the same level 3 times, right? So that's kind of the cheat, right? And I don't really think that's really cool. Part 4, again, for part 4, it says instruction game and game end scenes. And by the way, notice that I didn't mention the external document. Again, please note that you would have to update it, just like you would have to do it for assignment 3, right? You have to keep updating your document when you change stuff. Like here, you may not have all your assets and stuff ready to go, right, for part 1. You wouldn't have it, right? You have an idea of what you want to put together. That's your concept. To wireframe it, tell me what it's going to be, right? But for part 2 and part 3, you'll have more of an idea of what's happening, and so you can do things like screenshots. Like, obviously, you can't produce screenshots for your external document on part 1, but part 2 and part 3, yeah, you could definitely produce screenshots for me, right? So you can make that external document grow, and that's what I'm hoping you'll do for 2 and 3. Of course, by part 4, everything should be done, and your external document should be fully complete, right? Notice I'm not mentioning external document, but I'm still going to check it, right? Because I'm going to see, well, did they update it? Did they leave it alone? Is it still the old document from part 1? You'll lose marks if you don't do that. From a marking scheme perspective, this whole thing is worth 78 points, okay? 78 points. But, and what I've done is I've broken it out so these 2 parts are 13 points each, and these 2 parts are 26 points each. So 26 marking points I'm talking about. So I'm going to look at 26 little things in part 3 and part 4, only 13 things in part 1 and part 2, right? Broken out. So just, to kind of let you guys know how I'm marking. So again, here's the overview. Either alone or as a team of up to 3, you will create an original 3D game. Okay, when I say original, I mean it's got to be yours. Does it have to be original art? No. Does it have to be original concept? Like no one's ever seen this on Earth? No. I mean, it's got to be original, as in it's got to be yours. It can't be someone else. Someone else couldn't have written it. I mean, you could try and recreate another game that's already been done. That I would agree with, right? Like, for example, you want to make another CSGO, but you want to make it on, as an example, just with web-based CSGO, right? It's not an original concept. You might even use their artwork, right? But it's your code. You made it work on the web. Great, all the power to you, right? That's okay if you did that, right? Good luck, by the way. That's really tough, right? But I mean, I'm just saying, it's if you really wanted to go there with you and your partner, you can go ahead and put your head together and get it done. So again, you're going to make. It says one thing that I will not accept, and I'm putting it out there for you guys, is puzzle games will not be accepted. I'm kind of putting it out there again, puzzle games. And the reason why puzzle games are no good, I'm not asking you to do any kind of like, mind memory game 3D, where you do like some kind of puzzle or some kind of card game or something like that. This is an arcade game. I want you to think about this as a 3D arcade game, okay? So no puzzle games. Please don't give me things like connect the dots in 3D, all right? Don't do that. Or let's play, I want to do, ping pong in 3D. That would be bad too, okay? You know what I'm saying? I want you to do something. It's got to be a 3D game. It's got to make sense. No puzzle games, okay? If the whole level's a puzzle, how to figure it out, that's a different thing. Like, for example, I got to figure out which step to jump on in order for me to get to the next platform so I can win, so I can get out of the level. That's different. That's you know, you can make your game as interesting or as challenging as you want in that perspective, right? I think, you know, that's where your puzzle piece can go, right? So you must use your own graphic and sound assets. And when I say your own, I mean you acquire them, right? You don't have to make them. I'm not asking you to be a Blender specialist or do things in animations in Maya or buildings in 3D Studio Max or anything like that. Yeah.
Can we import custom graphics?
From
Models, sorry.
From Blender?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, there's no limit on this one. So there's no, like, you can't do it. Even on assignment 3, I didn't tell you have to make your own. You could have imported stuff for assignment 3 for Blender as well, right? I'm not asking you to not do that, right? What it says here is scoring system must also be included. Scoring means like life and some kind of score, right? That's what it means. And also notice that up here it says the game must have a menu scene, one scene. So let's count the scenes. Menu scene, instruction scene, 3 game level scenes, that's 5 so far, and a game over scene, that's 6 scenes, right? How do I do 6 scenes, right, when it comes to this? And there's different ways of doing that. Here's a way, 6 web pages. You could do 6 web pages, right? I mean, really, that's what it is. Each page is a bloody scene, right? And when you click something, it goes to the next page. That's the most simplest way of doing it. This is the web, right? We're not doing Unity. So certainly you can have different pages as different scenes. If you want to be challenged, and I'm going to show you how to do it next week or the week after, I'm going to be creating a finite state machine, right? That switches between scenes, right? So kind of uses JavaScript with one web page, and we swap scenes in the web page. That's a different thing that we're going to be using, and that'll be done probably next week or the week after. We'll talk about this finite state machine that we're going to be using to switch between scenes and how to do that, right? Yeah.
If let's say you're using one game loop object,
yeah,
right? One script.
Yep.
Can you redraw the objects in the scene, like remove everything?
Yes. Of course, and we'll do that today. Actually, we'll do that today. So that's another way of doing it. You can have one page, and then all you do is everything is in one page, but it looks like different scenes. It's up to you. That's going to be a very complex thing to do. It could end up making your code very long and unwieldy, right? Like really, really long pages, right? I would recommend breaking it up into different files, and so that way you keep yourself compartmentalized, right? That's just the way to go. Okay, your own graphic and sound assets. You may choose a WebGL API such as 3JS. See how I said may? You may choose a WebGL API such as 3JS and a physics engine such as PhysiJS. Okay, it has to be a JavaScript. See, the name of the title is JavaScript 3D game. So please, no XNA, no Unity, no no Unreal Engine outputting stuff, no Game Maker, no RPG Maker, or anything else that's going to generate stuff for you. I want you to write things in JavaScript. You can use any framework or, if you will, API you want. For example, let's say you don't like 3JS, and for the final project, you really want to use Babylon, right? I will allow it, all right? Good luck with it, though. I'm not going to teach you how to do it. That's on your own. That's just almost like a little bit of a mini capstone you're working on your own, pretty much, right? And a physics engine. I noticed I'm using PhysiJS, but let's say you say I don't like PhysiJS, Tom. I want to use AmmoJS, or I want to use something else, CanonJS, or something else, right? That's up to you to make it work with the engine. I just found that there's more documentation on this stuff than there is in other engines, other physics engines out there, right? Or what if you don't want to use a physics engine at all? And that's up to you. You want to move everything. You want to translate everything across the 3D world. That's up to you too, right? It just means any kind of physics-like effects, you're going to have to figure out on your own. You're going to have to create your own physics effects, moving things around, and so on. And that's not undone. Of course, we've done that before in the past. Just physics makes it a little bit more realistic looking, and so on. Note, you may use the output from an assignment, from any team member, right? This is kind of written wrong. You may use the output from any team member, from an assignment from any team member as a starter level. right? So you could sit there and go, okay, well, let's say, for example, you and I are working together, right? And we're doing an assignment together. So I'm using your assignment because I think your assignment 3 is awesome. Let's just say, right? So I want to use your assignment, and we start from there, and we're going to work on level 2 and 3 together, right? That's okay. Or what if, here's the other thing that can happen, right? You've already worked on assignment 3 and you're done. You've already picked your partner, you know how they work, and you want to stick to that partner, and you just want to extend assignment 3, right? To make it so it's the final project. So you had 2 more levels. I will perfectly accept that. So why reinvent the wheel? You already have level 1, right? I'm paying you for it again, right? If you use it, it just needs a little bit of modification. Yeah.
But your assignment 3 is designed to have you 1 level, but multiple iterations.
Yeah, that won't work. You'd have to have a way of transitioning to another multiple iteration world, right? So you'd have to create 2 separate worlds. Nice try. I like your ideas, but I want each iteration of that game world somehow to be finished. Or let's say, for example, you can really do 10 levels within your first assignment, right? So your first assignment can do 10 or 20 levels, whatever you want, right? Well, when you reach level 10, you're gonna go to a whole new scene, right? Which is game level scene 2, right? As an example, or whatever it's going to be. Okay, does that make sense? So that way it keeps everyone on the same level. I don't want everyone's being judged the same. I don't want people said, well, can I create a difficulty level, easy, medium, hard? Yes, you can. Just break it up over 3 different levels. Make it totally like they're totally different. You can definitely increase the difficulty, right? But it can't be the exact same game. Please don't give me, like I said to you before in assignment 3, the color of the sky in level 1 is blue, the color of the sky in level 2 is green, and the final one is red. Okay, but they're the exact same, but the color of the sky is different, and a few differences in terms of enemies. The enemies are red and green in the first level, and green in the second level, and yellow in the third level, but they're the exact same enemies. Guys, it'll be so easy for me to see that, and it's like you're handing me one level 3 different times. So you're not going to get the price of admission. You're not going to get 10% for that. It just won't happen. All right. Even if you make a really cool story about it. All right. Here's a really cool story about how my enemies change colors from one level to the other. No, I'm not going to give it to you. All right. So that won't work. The marking scheme is pretty much what you've expected in the past. And notice how I'm focusing first on your external documentation and everything else. The first piece is all about your functionality. So you have to have a menu scene. Menu scene itself will have at least 3 options: your play, instructions, and exit. You can be able to do that. So you can exit right from the menu, right? Hey, how do I exit out of a web page? And also, I've talked about it in web game programming, like COMP397, but how do I do it out of a web page? You can't shut the web page down. Chances are, most times, Google Chrome, if you're using Chrome as an example, will stop you from exiting the actual page. But take the person to an end scene or an exit, saying thank you for playing or whatever. That's okay, right? That's equivalent to exiting the game. You're not playing anymore, right? But please don't try and shut the page down. It may not work. An instruction scene, what is that? So please, I'm not asking here for a tutorial level. Okay, that's not what I'm asking for. So I know some of you may be tempted to make a tutorial level on how to play and everything else. Yeah, that's really cool. I give you a good bonus for it, but that's not what I'm asking for. It's just an instruction screen, 2D, to show me how to play the game. Like avoid the traps. And it could be screenshots. You put some screenshots in your instructions and say, avoid the traps. Here's how you move. Here's how you jump. Here's how you shoot. Here's the things you need to pick up. And it might be multiple pages of instructions that you want to put in there in order for me to show me how to play, okay? Please don't get me to download a PDF document or a Word document how to play, okay? That's not going to suffice for my instruction screen. The instructions have to be on the web, yeah. Just
going to the first level, like let's say starting off, so the first level, you're just walking through or moving through 3D space, and the instructions come at you. Is that okay?
No. I want you to have a separate instruction scene, right? You want to add those in. If you want to add in settings, in another menu item like settings. Remember, anything. This is I'm describing here the bare minimum requirements, right? If you want to add other things to your game, you go ahead. So let's say you want to add a settings screen that actually says help dialogue or whatever pops up throughout the entire game, right? So hey, get this. You know, there might be an arrow that's an animated arrow that says, go over here, get this, pass through this thing, you know, wrong way, go this way, you know, one of those kind of things. That's up to you if you want to add those helper things, but that's not an instruction scene. Instruction scenes should say, this is how you play the game at a very high level. You can make it one or more pages, but it has to be complete. You have to kind of talk about how to score, how to avoid dying. You may want to talk about things like some strategy on how to play the game, those kind of simple things. It's all going to be in one or more pages in your instruction scene. And you can flip pages because your scene are going to be self-encapsulated. You know, you can do it 3D, you can do it in 2D. And we're going to be talking about that, 2D or 3D. In other words, you may want to flip pages in 3D, you know, kind of thing to show the page. Maybe it's going to be a page, and people have done this before as well for me in 3D games, where they've made a page that's actually a plane with an image on top of it, an image plane, right? And the image plane is in 3D space, right? And as you read the instructions, you just move forward. So you see the next piece of instructions, then you move forward that one, you see the next page and the next page. But they're just a bunch of image planes inside 3D space. That's totally fine. That's cool actually too, right? You can totally do that for your instructions. You can make it as cool or as simple as possible. And again, it's only worth 4 marks here, but getting the instruction scene going, it takes a little bit of extra work. Your gameplay scenes. Notice that your gameplay scenes, there's 3 different game levels, right? And each game level must appear and function differently than the other game levels. And like I put in here, for you to qualify to make a game level, each game level should have a unique goal, right? Which means, please don't make the door in the exact same spot that you're going to go from one place to the next, right? Or please don't make the game function exactly the same. Maybe there's going to be a different thing to get. Like, for example, in your first level, maybe you have to pick up a sword, right? And once you get the sword, you pass into your second level. I'm just making this up, right? And when you get to your second level, the next thing you have to pick up is a shield. And when you actually pick up the sword and shield, I don't know, you give functionality to your character so you can use it. That's kind of cool. You don't have to, but let's say you have to pick up certain items and they're in a different spot. And by the end, you have all the things you need to defeat the boss monster at the end, right? That's totally cool. That's like, you know, kind of an interesting little game that you can put together. All right, so a game over scene. That's a separate scene. And it will display your final score, give the player option to play again, and an exit menu. Exit to the menu. Those are the things you can do. So back to the other stuff. Basically start over again. Please don't make your restart button in your same scene, in your gameplay scene. I don't want that to happen. It's got to be a separate scene for this assignment, all right? So it's not like all one scene. You're not making assignment 1, assignment 2, or assignment 3 here. You're making your final project, and your final project requires a final scene for your game. Okay, that's your game over scene. Player control of an avatar, vehicle, or character. Some people made, for assignment 3, they've made a vehicle, right? And they want to still use a vehicle through the entire thing. They can still use the same vehicle for level 1, level 2, level 3. I'm okay with that, all right? Don't kill yourself and make different vehicles. That's not what I'm asking. But you have to be able to move your player, and it's got to be believable, right? So I'm giving you 6 marks for that. Just moving. That means jumping, moving, you know, the whole thing. The total control of your avatar is what I'm talking about. Simple AI, okay? And I'm talking about whether they're enemies or hazards. It doesn't have to be enemies, okay? It could be hazards. It could be things like traps. It could be things you have to jump over that you get points for. When you jump over, okay, you've made that, you know, make sure the player knows they've gone by an obstacle or whatever. Give player feedback, like you should be doing in assignment 3, saying you made it, right? You know, something to make them know that they've got some points and then there's a reason why they got it. Don't just change their point values on the top screen, right? That doesn't mean anything. They might not even notice, right? So put in there that, you know, there's, you know, you've made that, you've avoided the hazard, avoided the trap, something that comes up. Random opportunities to generate points for the player. This is pickups. These are extra little, you know, jewels or points or something else that you know, makes the game interesting for you to play. If you're making a car game with a 3-dimensional car, maybe you're going to pick up gas cans, you know, or whatever. Or maybe you're going to pick up people. You know, that's something that we've done before in other 3D games. Something that makes sense. Please don't make a 3D car game that you're going to pick up chickens, right? Unless that's the game the game is called Pick Up the Chicken, right? I'm just saying, just make up. It has to make sense, right? For what you're doing. A scoring system. Again, we talked about this. Notice that you have to generate some points and so on. And you may use, like I said here, a web API such as Easel.js to produce a scoreboard on an HTML canvas. Okay, so again, you could use Easel.js if you want to. You don't have to. You could totally use HTML, like regular HTML with CSS, to do an overlay. That's perfectly fine as well. As long as the score shows up, I'm good. But the player must have a life counter or health status or some kind of life bar. I know I've seen people make a life bar that's a three-dimensional life bar that kind of hangs over their heads. That's totally cool too. Or some kind of spherical-looking object that changes life. Or maybe they have in their heads-up display, they kind of create health bars or whatever they want to do instead of, or a number of hearts, whatever. It doesn't have to be a number. You can make it something graphical, something, you know, that you want to represent life, or even points. So let's say, for example, I don't want to use points. I want to use dollars. Or I don't want to use points. I want to use stars, right? And if I get enough, you know, I keep on getting more and more stars. So three times stars, or 4 times stars, or half a star, or whatever you're going to do to collect points. That's totally fine with me. Or 5 coins, or 10 coins, or 30 coins, or 100 coins. Every time you collect a coin, you get 1 coin. You know, it's up to you how you do it. You just have to make it so that it makes sense. Yes.
Right now the game is lagging a lot. Or add all of that, is it even going to be possible to test it?
Yes. The only reason why the game will lag is because there's, you know, you have to optimize. There's a reason why it's lagging, right? Yes, you can make it smaller screen. This doesn't, like right now we're using a full screen. Even your assignment 3 could be a smaller screen than full screen. Full screen, and thank you for that, full screen takes up a lot of resources. All right, like even the game I'm making right now that with you guys takes up a lot of resources. Limiting your game screen to, let's say, 1024 by 768 or 640 by 480, that old, you know, old standard of arcade games, totally will speed up your game because you're limiting your game world into a smaller space. You can totally submit it in an optimized way. I'm totally good with that. As long as your game works and it's playable, I'm happy with it, right? If it's too small, right? Like if you make it like 50 by 50, yeah, I'm not going to accept that. It's got to be like something decent, like 640 by 480. Or let's say you say, I want to make a game for the mobile device, and I want to make my game 320 by 480, right? If it's doable, right? 320 by 480 work on an old iPhone, right? Or an old, you know, a mobile phone. I'm okay with that if you want to size your game for mobile, right? But you have to talk about that. You have to discuss that your game is sized for mobile, right? So, but I like your questions. Okay, sound effects, again, you can use Sound.js or another library to create sounds, or you can use HTML5 sound. It's up to you how you want to do it, as well as a game soundtrack. So sound effects and a game soundtrack are required for your final project, right? It's not an option, as before. Internal documentation, this is easy marks, guys, and a lot of times people don't add this stuff in and they lose easy marks for their assignments. Please make sure you internally document your work. And that means comments, right? Comment headers, you know, who's working on what, you and your partner, that kind of stuff. Versions for each of your files. I mean, it doesn't take a lot to kind of come up with this stuff. External document is worth, it's actually worth 13 marks, not 12. I think it's worth 12 or 13 marks. I got to check it out. It's not exactly 12. Let's see what I did with it. Maybe I made it 12. Yeah, it's worth 13. Notice that the balance, that's incorrect. Let me just change this thing for future versions. So notice that the balance of this is a little different for your final project. So version history is one mark, but there's a couple places like interface sketch, that's worth 2 marks, right? And screen descriptions, the screenshots, is worth 3 marks, right? So I want you to take, you know, pictures of all this stuff, like, you know, 1 for your start screen, 1 for your gameplay screen, 1 for your game end screen, 1 for each level of difficulty, you know, whatever it's going to be. That's a lot of screenshots, and that's why I'm giving you 3 marks, right? Your game worlds and your levels, describe your levels, all these things. There's going to be areas that you're going to get a few more marks than normal. And of course, you're going to share it on GitHub and put it up on a cloud service. These are all things that you've seen before. So it's nothing different than we've talked about before, right? In terms of what's required, right? Some things we can talk about, some potential game bonuses like a final boss monster, power-ups for the player's avatar, cheat codes. That's not that difficult to come up with, right? A mini game within a game, like picking a lock, you know, one of those kinds, like safe cracking, or one of those kind of opening a door, you know, some kind of way of, if you want to do your puzzle, do it in this. Do your puzzle game and your mini game, right? Be careful, please don't spend too much time on the mini game. It's not that many, worth that. None of these are worth that many marks that are going to put you over the edge, right? If these are extras that I'm going to look at, and others, anything else that I see, empower the player to gain an NPC to help him out, right, or help her out, right, and make it possible for the player to save and load his game. This is really tough to do, and the reason why is because you're saving three-dimensional positions in some kind of JSON format, you know, and then you want to reload everything, load it back up again. How to load and save, it's more difficult than you think it is. Submitting your work, I want your external document, MS Word or PDF, a link to your project files on GitHub, a link to your live site on the cloud service of your choice, and your project files as a backup, zipped and submitted to eCentennial. Yeah.
So, for the cheat code, is it okay if we give you codes?
Yeah, I want to know the codes, right? So how would I know there's cheat codes if I don't know what they are, right? So. Yeah, like for example, let's say you want to put in God, right? And it's now your God mode. You can't be hurt. Or you know, so I can get through the levels, right? Or let's say you say level 2. You put L2. You put that in there. Or you hit escape and then you put L2 and then that takes you into level 2, right? I'm okay with those kind of cheat codes. Those are things that are going to help me test and help you test, right? And then if you put them in there, I'll accept those as a cheat code. Give you bonus marks for that. So that's extra work. Any extra work you do, whether it's this assignment or assignment 3, because we're not done assignment 3 yet, let's do this Friday, right? Anything extra you do, please put it inside your submissions up on eCentennial, right? Or in your external document, so I know what they are. I can't give you bonus, you know, points unless I see what you've done, right? If I don't know what it is, and I might miss it. You know, I'm going to look at a bunch of different people all at once, right? And I might miss your work, and I want to credit you, so please let me know that it's there. Okay, there's the cheating clause here. Just, you know, no, that means like, you know, no copying work from other people, and don't download other people's code. You can certainly use examples of other people's code to make things work, but it's got to be your own. Any questions around final project? It looks big, but all I'm doing is I'm going into details for you. That's all. I'm kind of talking about it all with you so that you understand what I'm looking for, and it's recorded for you guys, so you can always go back and say, what did he say about that level? You know, part 2. It means this, right? So that way you don't have to, you know, kind of ask me what I'm looking for, right? Remember that I do want an update, and this is what I haven't kind of put in your part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4 submission. To your external document, I'm looking for updates to your GitHub, obviously, right? Because if you're doing GitHub properly, then I should have commits for part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. There should be updates for the whole thing, right? If there's no updates, that means you're not really using GitHub properly, and you're not going to get full marks. And also, there's a bit of a tidbit on GitHub that I talked about even on the last assignment, on assignment 3, which says, you know, if you're working with somebody else, right, I want each person to kind of, you know, have equal amounts of submissions. It can't just be just you, right? It has to be you and your partner. I guess I didn't include it in here, but you and your partner have to kind of equally submit, you know, some commits. So I want to see both people working. I don't want to see like one person pulling the other person or the other 2 people, right? Everyone's got to have a part, right? So don't take on the third partner. Let's say, for example, you're really comfortable with, you know, your partner that you worked on for assignment 3, right? You're really comfortable. And you don't want to take on a third partner because you're comfortable. Don't do it, right? Even if they try and pressure you. Or let's say, for example, you're really comfortable with your partner, but you realize there's so much work to do, and a lot of other projects are coming down the pike from different professors. And you know what? You want to have a little bit of extra manpower or woman power, you know, to help you out, right? So you take on an additional partner. Give them something to do. Don't just take them on. There's got to be a reason why you have the 3 partners with you, your 2 partners, right? So again, up to 3, I want to see that everyone's working together, right? And that they can help you out. If they're not helping you, please don't take them on, all right? Any questions at all before we shut this one down and then take a short break before I get into the final pieces that you need for your project, for your assignment 3? Yes?
There wasn't the communication before saying the first person view. Is it okay to do a third person, or
it's told? I'm not mentioning it, so you can do it.
Okay. So if you just move camera a bit backwards, just so you see the player.
Yes. So the question is for people who can't hear online. Is it okay to do a third person perspective instead of just a first person perspective? And the answer is yes. For this one's no hold barred. On this one, you don't have to use physics. If you don't want to, you can do things differently. I want to see your concept though. I want you to, if it's something that's out of whack, please let me know. If you're trying to do something that's totally, if you're not sure, talk to me about it. Say, Tom, I'm not sure. Does this qualify? Is this okay? And if I say it's okay, then you can move forward. If it's not okay, then it might come back to bite you later on, right? So But the question is, can I use the third-person perspective? You certainly can. I'm going to warn you that it's more difficult to do a third-person perspective in many aspects than to do a first-person perspective, only because of where your camera is positioned, especially when you're fighting other creatures. So something's, for example, you're running away from something. Here's the scenario. So you've got your third-person perspective, and you're running away from something, and it's behind you. Where is it going to be relative to your camera? In front of your camera, in front of your character. So here's your character, and then here's the other thing following you. So now you don't even see your character. It's obscured by this thing that's in front of the camera, right? That's the problem with third-person perspective. You got to figure that out. You got to figure out when in a combat situation, sometimes, or if something's chasing you and it's right behind you because you're walking, but it's in front. You can actually see it in the camera that it's obscuring your view, right? And what happens? Depending on how far away. If you're directly behind, it doesn't work. But what if you're not just directly behind, but from you're looking at it from a top-down perspective as well, almost like an angle. So you're down and away. It's not just like you're directly behind. Please don't do directly behind. If you're doing a third-person perspective, it'll mess you up, right? And it's got to be something where, fine, the character is there, but you can still see your character. The other character has to have either be faded out, transparent, something in order for you to play, right? Same thing with levels. You're passing through a door, and your character goes behind a door, but your camera is behind the door. So you can't see your character anymore, right? That's kind of weird. You have to kind of figure out, like, somehow, whatever happens, you can see your character and nothing gets in your way, right? And that's the challenge of doing true third-person perspective. That's why I recommend against it. I know I've done this before, and it can be very challenging to figure all these semantics out. It's just going to slow your production down. And if you've already done first-person perspective, guys, don't reinvent the wheel. We don't have a lot of time. We have 3.5 short weeks. Notice that this last part is not due on the Friday, the last Friday of the semester. This is due on the Wednesday. That's one thing I should probably have pointed out. Thank God that I did, right? It's not due on the Friday. It's due on the Wednesday. That means from Friday to Wednesday, you've got to put together your instruction screen and your game end screens. But you should probably have already laid it out. If you plan properly, right, you should have already laid it out ahead of time. Here's another question that I have for me, right? Tom, it's almost like I'm a virtual Tom, right? Tom, what if I want to finish early? What if I don't want to do things in the order that you've told me, and I want to submit everything, every part in different parts of my, the code early? Like I want to finish 2 weeks from now. Am I done the course? Can I leave if I submit the 4 parts in the 4 different places and all that stuff, and I've done everything I have to do with my partner? Yeah, the answer is you're done, man, right? So if you want to submit your work early, you don't want to wait till Friday to submit, and you're done everything next week, and you've done your 4 parts in in 4 different in the 4 different drop boxes. I'm good to go. Full game. I'm giving you this now, so you have a full schedule of when things are due. It doesn't mean you have to do them then. You can do them ahead of time. Submit it all and see you later, and I won't see you again, right? Again, I'm not so sure. The only thing I recommend to you is that I'm not sure yet if I'm going to do a final presentation on this whole thing. And my feeling is I probably won't, just from a timing perspective. We're a little bit behind the ball on this one. I'm probably about a week or 2 behind where I wanted to be when I got to this point, right? And only because of, I'll be honest with you, the library has been giving me a little bit of headaches. And if it gives me headaches, I can only imagine how it's giving you a headache, right? The library itself, 3JS, it's constantly being updated. Right now it's at level 75, like revision 75. So if you were going to download and install the latest version, I highly caution you against it. I highly caution you against it. I'd rather recommend grab level 73 and stick to that one. Why? Because there's no TypeScript support whatsoever for level 75. That means you're going to have to update your own TypeScript definition libraries. It hasn't come out yet. So please don't go to the latest and greatest version R75 for this particular one. I don't recommend it, right? So that's a headache for me, and it's been causing me a little bit of, I have to try and figure out PhysiJS, again, how it works with the latest version. It's actually built for version 59, right? So PhysiJS built 59, we're using build 73, right? That's crazy a difference. And so we're getting some really whacked out effects on PhysiJS and so on. That's what I'm saying. These are the things that have caused me a little bit to be behind, and I've had to reinvent the wheel a couple times. Also, if you notice, I've departed from the book, right? Because I can only go so far with the book, the basics, and then the book was over first half of the semester, and now in the second half, I'm not using the book anymore. I'm generating this stuff for you as we go. right? So that's caused me a little bit more prep than I would have liked, and that's again what's delaying everything. So again, I figure about a week and a half, maybe even 2 weeks behind, and so because of that, I'm not so sure we can afford to have a final project, a final presentation. I mean, that would have been nice to see your final presentations, and I want to see your work as we go. So over the next few weeks, again, I may not teach the full 2 hours of the class. I may do the first hour, and then the second hour I want to sit with you guys and do a review of your work. Might happen. And also I might set up some appointments with you outside of class to review your work as well. All right? So that might be something else we might be doing. Any questions around that? Right? Because I want to make sure that all the marking is taken care of by the last day. So by the Wednesday, I'm hoping, I'm putting it out there, I'm hoping that all the marking will be mostly done, and that all you're submitting is your final piece to your project by the Wednesday. By Friday, right, we don't have class on Friday, but by Friday, as an example, there might be some space in the schedule, right, for us to do different things, or even the Wednesday, because there won't be, I don't know why we would teach on the Wednesday if it's due Wednesday, right? What we might do on that Wednesday is have a bit of free time for other activities. I can't record what that is, but we might have some free time on the Wednesday, the final day of class, around this time frame for some free activities, right? Any other questions around this stuff? All right, let's take a 5-minute break, come back, and then finish off scoring and some other problems. Talk about the problems we've had for assignment number 3. Okay, thanks so much.